Welcome to As Long as the River Flows, a Keepers of the Water podcast. Episode 32 is part 1 of a 4-part series on the criminalization of Indigenous land defenders in Canada, Our Truth. In part 1, we hear from Chief Na'Moks and Jesse Stoeppler. We start off with Chief Na'Moks, who is Hereditary Chief of the Tsayu, one of the 5 clans of the Wet'suwet'en Nation. The traditional name he carries is thousands of years old, and as part of their matrilineal society, was also held by his grandmother, who wore the very same regalia he wears today. The role of a hereditary chief carries the sacred responsibility of protecting the 22,000 square kilometers of Wet'suwet'en territory, a duty grounded in ancestral law that has remained unchanged both before and after colonial contact. As a vocal and respected leader, Chief Na'Moks has brought international attention to the violations of Wet'suwet'en rights in the context of unconsented resource development. He has spoken at the United Nations headquarters in New York and Geneva, sharing his people's message about the militarized role the RCMP plays on their territory. Since 2019, he has appeared in nearly 100 media interviews, both print and broadcast, denouncing what he describes as a campaign of state-backed harassment, surveillance, and discrimination.
Howdy, Denny's ate you, Saka's ate you, Sky's ate. I am Chief Na'Moks. I am also caretaker of the name Chief Guise. I am a hereditary chief of the Wet'suwet'en Nation. We have 22,000 square kilometers of unceded, non-treaty, undefeated lands. We are the law and governance on the land. We had to prove that in a court case. First, we started in the British Columbia Supreme Court, and then we had to go to the Supreme Court of Canada. And on December 11th, 1997, the Supreme Court of Canada said, yes, you exist. Yes, your laws are there. Yes, your governance exists. And now Canada and British Columbia itself are ignoring it, all for industry, as you had stated. Like in our law, everything that we do is truly democratic. It starts with our people, the House members and the clan members. Then it comes to the nation. So everything that we do is holistic in our decision-making and what it does for the future. Because always our elders, our chiefs, they've always told us that we're not doing this for ourselves. We're doing it for the next generations to come, the children, the grandchildren, and those who are yet to be born. And for the betterment of all. It doesn't just say for the Wet'suwet'en. It doesn't say just for the Indigenous people. It says for the betterment of all humans. In our governance system, when we make a law to protect land, air, water, humans, culture, it is the law that stands for centuries. And we, all the clans of the Wet'suwet'en, all 5 clans, have held feasts in our governance building, our feast hall. And we all said that pipelines and these extractive industries that are killing this planet are not allowed on our territory. And what does British Columbia and Canada do? With the support of industry, who is actually steering the government, helping us lose the democracy of this country, helping us to become a state and a police state. They make us criminals because we protect clean water, clean air, human rights, the very existence of humans on this planet. And everything that we do must look for the betterment for centuries, not just the pocketbook, as you had stated. When we have to take on provincial and federal governments and industries that are worth billions and trillions of dollars, that's where the violence comes from. You know, they use a template book from David Petraeus of KKR of how to take over countries. First thing they do is say that money is a weapon. Well, when they talk about economic reconciliation, that is a weapon. That is just a fancy word for bribing you and telling you to sell out your soul, your culture, your dignity, your pride, your history. For what, $1? That doesn't last very long, and most certainly does not benefit Indigenous people. Now they go out and they say, okay, these projects are Indigenous-led. Well, we're not going to argue with our own people. You know, they intentionally put our people into the poorhouse and make sure that we're dependent on these governments and industry. But our law says we're above that. Our law says we will not go into the violent state that is coming at us. And our law also says that we will always be here and that we will always look forward to having a future for ourselves, for yourselves, for your children. You know, when we go into courts and when we face the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, they often say common law. I can't help but think that common law does not have common sense. If you have clean air, you have clean water, you have a future, you are healthy, you're willing to think on your own, you're willing to know who you are and what you can do. And you also know that your voice matters, that standing together makes a difference. They will use divide and conquer tactics at every level, from violence to laws that they make up and bend, and work against even the Constitution of this country to ensure that their projects go through. And yet there's no benefit to anybody on this planet, and most certainly not to ourselves. When we have to worry about the health and well-being of our children every time they go out onto our territory, that is not a democratic country. That is not a freedom that we live and enjoy. And we want to make sure that this next generation doesn't have to go through what we're going through. When we have to stand up and tell them that they're wrong and we tell our truth, out come the dogs, out come the helicopters, out come the snipers. They burn down our cabins. But we have every right to exist. We have every right to look to a clean future. And all we have done so far is follow our law. We've been peaceful. We have a right to be on our territory. We have a right to continue to live, to breathe, to adapt. But adapt doesn't mean give in, especially when they're trying to kill this planet. Especially when you got elected officials that are sitting in the pocketbook of industry and telling us that we're wrong because we simply want to survive. We've never wanted more than what we have. We simply want to protect what we have. And when we do the right thing, then it is best for everybody. And you have to realize that when you get governments and industry that come into this form of violence for this extended amount of time and actually changing laws to bend in their favor and then change the environmental laws, which are supposed to sustain us. And then it all goes down to who can make the most money in the shortest period of time by extracting things and destroying everything in its path. We get left with the mess every time. They get to go home. We are home. You are home. You have every right to speak up. You have every right to tell them that they're wrong. I can't help but think, how could they go home to their own children and explain what they do to their children with their extractive pipelines, oil and gas, mining, forestry, and say they're doing something for a pocketbook and not for the country that it's going to stay for? They're basically giving it away for free and actually giving them incentives to keep destroying this country, keep destroying the human rights, keep destroying the very freedoms and the rights that we have. When we say we have rights and title, we have rights to exist. Our title is our name. When we take on a traditional name, that is not something that is going to be there for an election cycle of 2 and 4 years. Those names are thousands of years old. And when we take on a name, we have to uphold the laws of humanity, of this planet, of our culture. When we say Kunga, that is a law, that is our trail, that is our history. But the Kunga that we have to leave for the future has to be better than what we're facing right now. And the only way that we could keep it better than the way it's going right now is everybody standing together, using their voices, and knowing they have every right to speak up, no matter what elected officials say. Even when they create Arms of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, they make it a militarized version of it just to fight us for protecting clean water, clean air. You have a right to stand up no matter what they say. And remember, the strength is in yourself. Don't let them take that away from you. When you use your voice, when we stand together and we tell our truth, we win. And we are scaring them. They are scared because they are being so violent at this time. So I want to thank you for this opportunity to address you and really listen to the people that are talking, because they're talking from experience. And we want to save you from experiencing what we had to go through. And I do encourage you to watch our film Yinta, because that is our truth. That is our story. To me, as hard as it is to watch that, I consider it a love story. That's a love story for humanity. That's a love story for this planet. And it's a love story for freedom. So, Masai, I thank you for this.
Thank you, Chief Namox. We now pick up with Jesse Stoeppler. Jesse Stoeppler proudly calls the Skeena watershed home. After completing a degree in Europe, he returned home to start a family and raise 2 future leaders amongst the peaks of the beautiful Bulkley Valley. Mentored by Hereditary Chief and Matriarch Yagalal, He embraces Gitxsan and Wet'suwet'en culture and has been actively participating in title and rights and clan governance as a member of Wilp Spook.
Denise, Tsakoze, Skyze, I'm very thankful for the opportunity to be here and to address you. And it's always such a pleasure to listen to Denise and Amox and the wisdom that he brings to the table. And I'm very, very proud to be not just behind you, but beside all of you. Namox had touched quickly on the issue of title and right. This is not an issue for Indigenous people. This seems to be an issue for the province and for the federal government. The Gitxsan and the Wet'suwet'en have an allyship. In the 70s, many of our ancestors came together in unity and in fellowship, embracing not only Gitxsan and Wet'suwet'en culture and laws and protocols, but did this on behalf of Indigenous people around the world and started this litigation. It was dragging along for many decades. And I know personally many of our families grew up without their parents or grandparents at their side because they had to travel for such a long ways to be at the different courthouses, first off in the BC Supreme Court and then later on the Canadian Supreme Court. And this turned into the what's now known as the Delgamuukw court decision, which eventually was pried out of Canada's hands on December 11th, 1997. And it has changed the environment and the landscape for Indigenous people here and for Indigenous people around the world. I know we had met with Indigenous people in Brazil, in the Amazon, in the southern border of Mexico to Guatemala, and many other places that have since had an opportunity to advance their title cases. And I feel very, very grateful for all of the hard work that was put into place. And collectively, I think many of us walked away from December 11th feeling as winners. And it took, if you fast forward a few years, it didn't take that long for not only, in our case, so-called British Columbia and the federal government, combined with the forces and fueled by money from industry, to question these very clear decisions. And Canada has since said, yes, you do have title and right, but we don't know what that means. What was meant to be really about title and right, inherent title to the rights to own, use, develop lands and resources, quickly turned into a mud fight of having to prove existence, first of all. I know there are many quotes coming out of this court case, but one that sticks with me was Yagala standing in front of the judge saying, "Look at me, listen to me. Can't you see me? I'm right here." But this was the situation. As Indigenous people, we didn't exist. And quite frankly, to this day, myself and pretty much everyone that's here is still known to Canada simply as a number. We can change our names and all of these other things. The one thing that doesn't change is a number that's printed on our ID cards. I'm really proud to see what has taken place since 1997. And I know the Haida have fought very hard with their title case, for example. Their decision-making came down last year, even though the litigation started shortly after Delgamuukw was filed. So you see how many decades this takes to figure out something that seems to be very, very simple. As Indigenous people, I'm embarrassed to admit to be not only Indigenous, but to be Canadian. If this is how we treat the rightful owners, title holders of these lands, we should have full access and jurisdiction over the lands and the resources as it was set out in the Supreme Court of Canada. And we had to prove that these lands were never surrendered or transferred in any sort of treaty or agreement. They were never ceded. And we do, as Gitxsan and Wet'suwet'en, have a right to evolve, which was another piece that really stood out to me within the Delgamuukw court case. And I remember the lawyers had argued at some point that we as Indigenous people have lost our ways, and tried to prove that by stating and questioning our people if they have windows in their houses and if they enjoy eating ice cream. And people were quick to answer yes to all of these questions. But that does not mean we have lost our ways as Indigenous people. Like any other human on this planet, we do have a right to evolve. But time after time, it seems like we do have to prove this. And constitutionally, this should have been settled in Section 35. And I think if you count the words, it's all of 17. It was made pretty clear. Thank you.
That was Jesse Stoeppler. Thank you for listening. To find out more about Keepers of the Water or to help out the cause, visit our website at keepersofthewater.ca. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast to be the first to hear new episodes, and follow us on Facebook or subscribe to the YouTube channel for more content. Miigwech.